Life can be fast-paced, strenuous, and flat-out overwhelming. Life transitions and taboo topics can make it hard to catch your breath. Welcome to Breathe, a podcast that enables you to slow down, get your bearings, and engage in real conversations where no topic is off limits. Breathe is presented by Breath of Life, hosted by David Person and speaker-director Pastor Snell.
Welcome to Breathe. I'm David Person, the co-host of this podcast that is presented by the Breath of Life television ministry. And of course, the host, seated next to me, looking like, as we used to say back in the 80s, GQ. GQ.
Yeah.
Pastor Snell. What's going on, sir?
Hey, I'm good, man. You know, you don't always catch me like this during the weekday, but we just got a lot of moving parts today. I'm trying to represent since we're on camera also.
Yeah,
we're on camera now.
Yes. And I keep forgetting that. I need to step up my game.
It's okay.
Coming in hoodies and whatnot.
Hey.
Pastor Nugent has got that. You kind of GQ yourself. You got that trendy. I don't know what they call these jackets.
The bomber jacket.
Oh, is that what they call them?
Yeah. Okay. But you know, as they say, fall has decided to show up.
It's here,
right?
Indeed.
And
it is here.
Yeah, I was taking the kids to school this morning in my normal chill attire, and I was like, I need a little more.
Yes.
You need a little bit more
colder out here
than
I anticipated. So yeah,
I like this time of year. Like we were talking about, I think the last time we got together. This time of year is great. Man.
Favorite time of the year.
Absolutely. Well, here now, we're going to commandeer the conversation. Yeah. Three men, two husbands, and a former husband.
There we go.
Come on.
We're going to talk about...
Or future husband, depending on
how you look at it. Depending on how you look at it.
Well, I'll receive that. We'll see what happens.
Hey, listen, we just put something out there for somebody that there is a single man here at the table.
That's right.
One that has many wonderful traits.
Yes.
I can attest. So.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate that.
Come on.
I appreciate that blessing. We'll see what happens with that. We're going to talk about husbands today.
Yeah.
Husbands' needs, wants, and misunderstandings. All right. So.
Yeah.
I want to start, Pastor Snell, kick this off by asking you to, from your own vantage point, how do we define the word husband?
Ooh.
Yeah, it's crazy. So there's so many different ways of looking at it. You look at it from the standpoint of what you saw growing up. Mm-hmm. You look at what's happening in the culture. You kind of have your theological worldview. But I think that, when you look at kind of, I guess, that Latin definition of the word husband, it's that term house band. Mm-hmm. So it's almost kind of connotes, I don't know if you guys remember back in the day in like elementary school, we had a bunch of pencils. Mm-hmm. You get a rubber band and put it around it and it will kind of bind them all together.
Yeah.
And so kind of the husband kind of playing that role of uniter, keeping, or the one being responsible for keeping everyone in sync. Moving in the same direction.
Right.
And kind of providing, I guess, a covering or protection. But honestly, I think the one thing I did want to say, though, because it's funny because like there are these different roles where people say the husband's role is to protect and provide, so on and so forth. But I do think, like, if you really look at it, I think the husband's primary role is just to be spiritual shepherd and intercessor. Because I don't think a husband is less if his wife provides a little more income.
Come on.
I don't think that's necessarily just the role is to provide income.
Right,
you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But I think that, he is the one that is kind of is given the task to create a spiritual climate. And again, you can't dictate all spiritual outcomes, but I think you can provide a spiritual climate that is conducive for growth and wholeness in the family.
Yeah.
I like that. I like the focus on spirituality. Mm-hmm. Though I will say, we do know that there are many men whose self-esteem, sense of self-worth hinges on whether or not they make more than their wives. So, and it's funny because the headship that we actually see in Scripture, it's a spiritual headship. Mm-hmm. It's not based upon like, all right, him being physically stronger or more dominant.
because if somehow, she was stronger than him physically, the headship doesn't necessarily shift. Or it's not just based on earning, because again, if she earns more, the headship doesn't shift. Like that headship, and it's crazy. I tell people all the time, it's kind of a hard truth to embrace. Even being the head, it's not ultimate authority. It's ultimate responsibility. It's like, okay, Eve eats the fruit first, but then God comes to the garden and says, Adam, where are you?
Yeah.
And
real.
so
real.
that's kind
Rubber
of
meets the road,
really what it all boils down to. And but the reason I think it's got to be spiritual is because, like, one of the things that women, that husbands crave, and we'll kind of unpack it a little bit more, is the respect from their wives. But one of the things that, I think you see it both in Christian and non-Christian homes, is that when a man does not operate with integrity, truthfulness, certain scruples or virtues, no matter how much he earns, he cannot maintain the long-term lasting respect of that woman. And so, like, he's seeing certain things, man, as a, this disrespect, this intentional undermining, when the truth is, like, that's just, in some instances, that's just the fruit that comes from the garden that has been planted. And so that's why I think, a husband who is prayerful, spiritual, consistent, loving, who exercises great judgment, by and large, I mean, there are exceptions to every scenario, but by and large, he ain't gonna really have a whole lot of fights, about who should be leading or that kind of thing. As a matter of fact, I mean, like, and this is just in all my years of counseling, I mean, at least in most of this is in a Christian context, but even in a non-Christian context, I've just never really had a woman be like, man, my problem with him is just he won't follow my lead. Like, I've never heard that.
No.
Like, he just won't get on the page with me.
Mercy.
Like, even when the woman has a very strong personality, she's a well-defined leader in her own right. The frustration that I see many times is a lack of leadership or a deficit of leadership.
Right. I want him to.
Not that, man, I want to take this role. It's frustration that I'm having to operate in that space. Is what I'm seeing from a lot of wives.
Which really kind of gets us a little bit into the arena of that conversation about submission. That's what I'm hearing as sort of the undergirding of what you just said. So, for many, again, the role of the husband, in part, is defined by, or the success of a man being a husband is defined by the wife submitting to him, and that's his expectation. Submission. That's what we hear a lot. And yet, that also is a point of contention, this idea of submission. Where do you stand on that?
Yes. So, we talked about it in another forum here recently. But one of the things I think about submission, it's crazy. So I just think it's weird. I don't think submission should actually have to be requested or required. I actually think it's an automatic byproduct. I think it is an incidental result of great, loving, godly leadership. Like, I mean, I just think, man, when a man is kind of handling business, across the board, not perfectly, but credibly, and with intentionality and thoughtfulness and care, I think that it teases out submission. It draws out submission. Like, man, it creates an environment where that woman feels so safe that she can let herself go, in the presence of her husband. Like, she doesn't have to keep her guard. She's not having to, because there's a safety there. And I think where that safety exists, I think that submission, and it's not me yielding choice, thought, opinion, but like, man, I have such conviction about where he's leading our home that there is a voluntary alignment with his mission, his character, his vision, and his expressed outcomes for our home.
Wow.
And that's kind of really what I see in a healthy dynamic. So, like, man, I think when it's operating as God intended, he's not like, man, well, I'm the man. You need to submit. Hey, this funny thing, because, like, if you have to say I'm the man,
yeah,
then you ain't the man.
it's
Like
problem.
you already
It's already a
in deep
problem.
water.
Yeah.
I know those are just some of the thoughts I have on it. So it's not even like, all right, man, stringent requirement. I just think that's the result of like great leadership.
Yeah, you create the environment for it. We talked about. I think Pastor Snell alluded to the other program, but I think it's appropriate to name it.
Yeah,
and it's called
Point of View.
Point
Yeah.
of View, which is another program that is done by Breath of Life, and Pastor Snell and Sister Snell are the hosts of that program, and they did a really great deep dive into submission. So for our podcast listeners who haven't necessarily checked out some of the other content that we have here at Breath of Life, definitely something we want you to check out. But we also touched on this in Vision Sunday as well. You create an atmosphere of leadership where, as we talk about that, the pyramid being inverted, right? So ultimate accountability and responsibility belongs to the person who's at the top. And because you are at the top, we invert that pyramid. And so now everybody above you is your responsibility as the primary leader. And so that's the role for the husband. That's the role that God has given to the man in this situation. And I think setting that atmosphere and that environment for people to be free and to act in their gifting. And so the reason why I want to say that is because I feel like there, especially in this day and age, 2023, the roles are not as clearly defined as they once were, or we don't necessarily have to stay with them. Yeah. So what I mean by that is, if you are the man and you're not good with money, then
hand over the check.
There's no love lost.
Yeah.
There's no hit to your manhood by saying she's actually good at this. And in Jamaican households, while we tend to be very conservative and traditional in a lot of senses, Jamaican men cook. Oh my, do they cook?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And so it is not uncommon to find a Jamaican dad in the kitchen. That is not necessarily a role that was traditionally attributed to the man, but we don't necessarily have to live with those roles as they have been generally defined. We can be free to explore in these relationships what works for the two of us.
Really, it is funny because that's why I think you have to kind of define it in kind of the narrow confines of kind of spiritual headship. Because like when you look at it, like you talk, like there's a brother in this city who I love. Like he works with his hands, he builds stuff, he makes stuff, he fixes stuff. But like he is the primary cook in his house. Like I mean, he is the personification of manhood. If you're gonna look at it in that context, I don't fix stuff, I break stuff. Right. You know what I'm saying? So but like that's how he relaxes, is what he enjoys. Right. Like there are some brothers I know that they love getting their hands in soil and planting and doing. Like there are some who are great with money and finances. Yeah, like in my home, like I'm probably. I have kind of an eye, well, not an eye, but more of a burden in terms of organizing systems and rooms and a chart for how we're going to maintain the order of the house. And again, that's not like a burden for me. Like I'm the one burdened to do that. I'm probably going to be the one more upset, like when it's not moving, it's not like that. Than Gianni is in many different ways. But what I'm saying is, I think that. I think there are probably some specific things that really only women can do, like have kids, right?
That's there. And
I think it's probably appropriate to say, okay, intruder breaks in the house, or there's a threat that, generally the husband should step up in that instance and kind of bring some, hopefully, protection and order to maybe a situation that could get out of hand. But I think really everything else, it should really be assigned more to strength and weakness of said partner.
I love it.
So how do you navigate that? How do you arrive at who should be doing what in a way that is productive and in a way that does not undermine someone's sense of self-worth?
No. So that's so I think I think the task or the order of the home should be built around the strengths of each partner. So again, in some instances, the husband may have a great mind for money,
Right.
and have number sense.
Right.
In some instances, there are some husbands that will spend you into a cardboard box, and it is the
Mercy,
wife
Lord.
that has that kind of nose for it. In some instances, the wife, man, she loves to cook and bake, and that gives her joy, and she's revived by it. In some instances, it is very much the husband, or they may want to share those particular roles or
Right,
responsibilities.
But how do you have that? How do you set those parameters? I guess that's what I'm asking. How do you?
I feel it.
How do you? How do you
Yeah.
create the environment in which you can have that talk and really spell it out and work it out?
So I think it's really only attention if somebody doesn't know what their strengths or weaknesses are. You know what I'm saying? So if he thinks his strength is finance,
Mercy.
when it's really not, or if he thinks his gift is organization when it really isn't, or if she thinks her gift is something and it's really not. But I think generally, you kind of have a sense that, okay, this is a strong point. Maybe this not so much.
But there's also plenty of room to course correct. The marriage relationship is intended to be for lifetime. So the hope is, if we get down the road a ways, a couple years in, maybe this is not my strength. We can make a switch. Secondly, also what I want to add to what Pastor Snell said there is, we come with some preconceived notions. I think you talked about, our definition of husband is a lot of times what we saw, or what our definition of wife is a lot of times what we saw. But to be clear, you didn't marry your mother. You didn't marry your father. You're not going to have. You may not get what you grew up with.
That's a good point.
And so you gotta come with an open mind and a clean slate. I love the exploration process, and Kanika and I have. When we counsel other couples, when we get a chance to mentor them, we tell them, man, enjoy this phase with this newness. Give each other a couple months. You manage the money for a couple months. Let's see what ends up happening, because there are things that we have realized about one another, Kanika and I, over the 17 years at this point, that we did not know year one, year two, that were strengths and or weaknesses. And so as you see those, there is opportunities to either get better, but if it's not going to get better, let's give it to the person who that's their thing. And I think the way it was shared earlier, there are those who are refilled by a certain thing. It's just a passion of theirs. I am very, OCD. I like things just a certain way. I don't necessarily come home and yell at folks, we need to clean up. I'll just start cleaning. And before you know it, others are cleaning with me, which is a whole other microcosm of leadership as well. But the idea is it's something that refills me. To see the order, to see the chaos actually depletes. So, and again, that's something that we've learned about one another over time. And I think learning those things and being honest about, I think that's another issue. A lot of times we want people to be fine with the mask of the person that we present and not who we really are.
But there's another thing though. You know how they say opposites attract? So you may see very kind of stern man or woman with very easygoing partner. Or you may see, kind of really organized, husband with very just kind of easygoing, kind of, wife. So and it's amazing because I actually think God built into attraction the very things that we need to complement us.
How about that?
I really do think that's what. So that's why that partnership is so critical. Because honestly, if you married a version of yourself,
Mercy, Lord,
it would not work. It's almost like two positive. They're going to repel against one another. A positive needs a negative in order for there to be even an attraction. So there's, kind of, you see it scientifically kind of built in. So even as opposed to seeing those differences as a weakness or a reason for there to create contention or stress, I actually think you kind of see how God matched you with somebody so that the gifts would be complete in the marriage and that there would be no lack. So that I think that is, if you're doing an honest assessment, again, there's going to be one parent that's going to be probably, a little bit more focused with discipline, crossing every T, dotting every I. There's going to be that other one that's going to be kind of lenient and kind of show a needed grace and compassion. And it's funny because those parents together form the image of God.
That's it.
So you see both kind of the law and justice of God, and then you see God's grace and compassion toward, kind of the shortcomings.
Yeah.
So like neither one is superior. They're both actually completely needed. In our home, I'm probably, financially kind of I create more of the construct, the vision, where we're going. But in terms of like executing it, like Gianna does all that. Like, I don't know where none of our money is going. Like, I mean, I have not paid a bill. I mean, I shouldn't even be admitting this on camera. Like, I mean, but like in terms of executing it, getting it where it should be going and getting it done, I don't have the appetite for that. You know what I'm saying? But she'll go through it and double check it and make sure, you know what I'm saying? But so like, but there's a teamwork with that. You know what I'm saying? And it's critical that we both embrace enthusiastically, kind of the roles that we have.
And that's not really, I mean, I don't think you have anything to, you said you shouldn't really be admitting. It's like it almost sounds like a CEO CFO relationship.
In some ways,
and that's very functional.
I think so. I think so.
But I ain't gonna lie, if something happened to her today, like, man, I wouldn't know how I have to find out where the electric company is, who we pay the water bill.
Right.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, but there's such a trust.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Where like she runs that, and then she empowers me to kind of, move and create a future for us in that regard.
Husbands in the house. Well, two husbands and an ex-husband in the house. For this episode of Breathe, we took over. We commandeered the mics. It's just the fellas. Pastor Snell, Pastor Kirk Nugent, and yours truly. Talking about being a husband and that experience. Well, you won't want to miss part 2 of this conversation. We promise more laughs and more insight as well as we tackle something that is an important conversation, to be sure, and one that needs to be had. We men need to understand our women better, and our women need to understand us better. And that's what we're hoping to achieve with these episodes of Breathe, these 2 episodes of Breathe. Well, I'm David Person. God bless you. I hope that you will tune in for, as I said, part 2 of this conversation between men about being husbands. And until then, don't forget, no matter how challenging life may be, you can always stop, pray, and breathe.
Breathe is produced by David Person for Breath of Life. Executive producer is Pastor Snell, and sound engineer is Kirk Nugent. Audio episodes of Breathe can be found on Apple, Spotify, or Google podcast platforms. For video episodes and extra content, check out the Breath of Life YouTube channel. Breath of Life is faith-based content, resources, and programs from a contemporary urban perspective for those looking for hope and guidance. We believe that every breath we take is a testimony that God is consistent, that He loves us, and has a plan for our lives.